Good morning. Welcome to the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting, March 9th, 2016. We'll do a roll call.
Sandino Thompson, Omar Khoury,
Present.
Jonathan Dodson, Mark Crittenbrink,
Present.
Tom Wilson.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Let's take a look at the minutes from the February 10th meeting. Does anybody have any comments?
I wasn't here, so I don't think we can vote on it.
All right, so we'll move that over to. Can I get a motion to move it to the end of the docket?
I make a motion to move the approval of the minutes from the last meeting to the end of the docket.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No nays. Item number 3 is cases withdrawn. There are none. Continuance requests, item number 4, there are none. On the consent docket, there are none. And for cases for individual considerations. Tom, do you want to? We have item 6A.
It's my intent to not participate either in the discussion or in the voting on item 6A.
Good morning, sir.
Hey.
Now that we have a quorum, we're all good.
If you want to hand the chair over to
I do.
Sandino, you can.
I don't want to step on his toes. We are on item 6A.
Okay. So, just hold this thing. Item 6A is cases for individual consideration. BCA 15-00026. Do we have comments from staff?
Yes, this is an item that was originally presented to the committee back in, I think, November, and then again in January due to a continuance. And in the interim, between some of those meetings, you've had, I think, a couple of different informal presentations by the applicant, attempting to garner some feedback from the committee about the design of the project and how it's been altered over the course of its development due to some concerns and desires of the client for the project. At the last meeting, there was another informal presentation, and generally speaking, the committee gave a rather favorable feedback to the project at that time. So what you have before you is the actual formal action for the CA on that case, and we've recommended approval to the committee, and we're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Okay. The questions for staff from the committee? Is the applicant present?
I'm Scott Dedman with ADG, representing the owner. Address is 920 West Main. So this is the project we brought before you guys several times now, and this is for our approval. This is the AC Marriott in Bricktown. And there really haven't been any major changes since the last time we brought it. There's a couple of small details on the elevations that I'll point out, and then we'll show some materials. I think, again, the key is the ground floor plan. I might go to that. There we go. And as you can see, that the functions, all of the public functions face the streets and are turned out. The corner element that we know is very important is the bar, and it opens to the street visually and physically in that area. You go up, the area over the bar is actually a 2-story space now, and we've like we mentioned last time, we've eliminated a couple of rooms to make that possible. I did misspeak last time. We were at 140 rooms and went down to 138, so we're currently at 138 rooms on this project. And then once you come into the lobby area, it's also a two-story space.
I'm sorry, did you say the space above the bar was 2 stories?
Yes, sir. The elevations from the construction documents. And then we'll bring up some renderings here in just a second. Part of this application, too, is the approval of the signage. And this is the Marriott standard signage. So the high signs on the building are 911 by 911, occurring on 2 sides. Some of the interior water features in the courtyard. If you go ahead and bring up the renderings, we can talk about those real quick. Thank you. So this is a corner, or this is actually the southwest corner, looking back at the bar area, so you can see how the bar extends up past the lower canopy. There will be lighting in that bar, and so that corner will really will glow and open up. JC, why don't go ahead and bring the materials up. So the materials on the project are all brick veneer. So we have 2 colors of brick veneer. We have a lighter brick, which forms the kind of the frames for the bays, and then an inset brick that's a little bit darker that is around the windows. There's also a sort of an in and out texture pattern to that brick. All of the other materials are either glass with aluminum frames, or it's an aluminum composite panel. And the 3 colors that you can see are a dark metallic, or a dark metal panel, and sort of this white accent trim that occurs in these areas, and then the silver metallic on the infill. Yeah, there's a mock-up of the system that's going to be used. Yeah.
Sorry, and so that's the, this
would-
is the black portion,
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
and then these are the 2 tones.
Those are the
for
colors,
for
correct.
the other elements.
Yeah, it would all be of the same system. And a view from Sheridan. View of the main entry. And then really, then just a view looking up at the main entry. So again, I know we've presented this several times, so I'm not going into a whole lot of detail, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Questions for the applicant?
I have some questions. Am I on?
I don't think so. Is there a light?
There we go. So your second floor plan does not show. It's open to below. It shows bedrooms on the submittal that I'm looking at. But you're saying it's, I'm showing it, at least second floor.
Second floor is
Above the bar. You said is
above
open?
the bar on the corner.
Okay, I'm turning around the direction.
Okay.
Got it. And that corner piece that you showed, where is that taking place? I don't need to see it.
That is the metal panel system.
Okay.
It really comprises all of this and the canopy as well.
So then where is the dark brick?
The dark brick is in the inset. So we have a lighter shade that forms the sort of the panel or the frame, and then the insets are done in a darker brick.
Okay.
And then this sort of suspended brick element is also the darker brick.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? I would like to just reiterate, I think the point is, it seems like we're considering the signage as well, which wasn't explicitly part of, I think, the previous submittal, so I think that's okay, but just wanted the community to be aware of that. I did have one other question.
Sure.
So you show some floating pedestal details, are these plans to be incorporated in some form or fashion?
Sorry, floating.
Yeah.
Oh, they are. They are in the courtyard area. So they're back. You don't see those from the street.
Okay.
And that's really a concept at this point. The final design of that fountain is being worked on.
Okay, but it's on the.
Yes, it's shown inside the courtyard.
Okay. All right. Other questions for the applicant?
I just have a couple of comments. Scott, I appreciate you guys redoing this from the second time. It looks wonderful. I like the idea of bringing some of the brick elements down to the sidewalk level.
Yes.
I do have a couple of questions because this entails also the sliding gate that we
Correct.
talked about before.
Actually, I think the approval for that was on the Hyatt. With the Hyatt.
No, when the Hyatt was approved, that concept had not come to light at that point.
I think we had approved the location of it.
We did approve,
and
I think we did approve a revision to the Hyatt that included that.
Because at some point we talked about having some artwork or some metal panels or some sort of system that hides the trash cans.
Well, at some point there was a lot of discussion about it being some sort of a public artwork
Right.
to be clad on the front facade of that gate.
So
And I did notice that, there wasn't really much said about that through the revision that we did on the Hyatt proposal to incorporate that design. And there isn't much said in this report with respect to how that design gets approved.
Because there was a detail of a gate that was submitted. That's not the same thing that we're talking about.
Well, I mean, that is the gate, but I mean, that's just the physical gate. There would be the artwork that would be applied to that.
Okay.
And so our intent would be to come back to you guys come back to the committee with a design of that artwork that would go on.
This may be more a question for staff, just based on that feedback. So would it make sense as we move forward, or if we're entertaining a motion, to try and incorporate at least that expectation in what we approve?
That'd be fine.
I think it would not be a bad idea to make it a condition of approval that they come back for that design.
Yeah.
On the staff report, item 3F, it says install pre-finished louvered side-proof gates at the west end of the service area facing Russell and Perry Avenue, and artwork to be submitted and reviewed and approved under separate permit. That's the direction we're heading, correct?
Right.
Okay.
It may be just good to highlight the point, so
Yeah.
so everybody's clear. I think we're all on the same page,
Yeah.
but that it might just be good practice to call that out so we don't forget about it. Okay. Other questions for the applicant? All right. I would echo Omar's comments. I appreciate the exhaustive effort you guys have put into this. I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to see some of the materials as well. It's always good to get a feel for how the thing's going to come together, especially
we
for
appreciate
something.
the process too, and being able to come in and do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion if we don't have any further questions on this item.
I make a motion to approve the submittal with the thought that that gate will come back to us at some point for review.
Okay. It's been moved by Omar that we move forward with taking note that the gate itself and the art will come back before the committee for review.
I second that motion.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any other discussion on the item? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions?
One abstention.
Okay, great. I think the motion carries with one abstention.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is 6B. That's BCA 15-00034 at 119 East Reno. Is there a staff report for this item?
Good looking project.
Yes, this is a little bit of an unusual item in that it's on the agenda twice. And by way of explanation, I will tell you what has happened here. They initially came in for a revision to, or not a revision, an approval on a CA. Paula, can you help me get the slideshow back? That qualified for administrative approval. Basically, there's a lot of exterior window replacement on the north and the south elevations. And the proposal was to use the structure that is presently vacant as private parking with 13 stalls and a couple of commercial spaces at the front and the back. And at that point, there is a drive aisle in the interior of the building that is essentially a two-way driveway that is 12'3" wide. However, because we felt it was on the interior of the building, at staff level, we did not review it and consider it a drive aisle per se. However, when they went to get the permits for it, the Development Services Department did determine it to be a drive aisle without respect to whether it's inside the building or outside the building, and they needed a variance for that because it is a two-way drive and a minimum drive aisle width for a two-way drive is 22 feet. So while we have approved the exterior modifications administratively, and they are in effect, we are bringing this to you as a request to give a recommendation on the variance request for that narrow drive aisle on the interior of the building. I did want to point out that access into the facility and out of the facility is from the Wanda Jackson Way, which is sort of an alley, but it's got a street name. And access in and out of the facility is controlled with lighting systems on the interior of the garage and the exterior, so that's hopefully going to cut down on head-on collisions in that narrow throat area. For those reasons, we have recommended to the committee that you provide a recommendation of approval on the variance request to the Board of Adjustment. And that completes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
All right, are there any questions for staff?
These parking stalls are mostly private, and then it said there's two that are commercial.
There's a small commercial space at the front facing Reno, and a somewhat larger space that is at the back facing Wanda Jackson Way. The 13 stalls would be, I believe, month-to-month leases, not general public parking, I don't believe. And the applicant's here to speak to the rest of that. If you have any more questions on that regard.
Okay. Other questions for staff?
We don't know what kind of traffic that alley gets, do we?
It's marginal at best, to my knowledge.
All right, is the applicant present?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Timothy Neville Lee. I'm an architect with Alford Hall, Monaghan Morris.
All right.
Would you like me to give you a brief description of the scheme? Because I think
Yeah.
there's some uncertainty about it. And unfortunately, I don't know if we've got the full plan in the Here we go. That's perfect. So, yes, just to recap very briefly on what Michael said, the 13 parking stalls in here are for private lease. There is a modest unit facing Reno to the south, which we see as being sort of a concession stall, something like that, so that won't have parking associated with it. And a bar or restaurant opportunity, perhaps to the north, overlooking that new Crazy Golf course that they put in. Again, that would not have parking associated with it. The 13 spots in the building are purely for private lease. For a number of reasons, the site, unfortunately, the Reno is sloping up to the bridge at that point, so there is no connection through, vehicular connection through to the building on the south. So really the only vehicular access to the building is on the north from that alley, Wanda Jackson Way. I don't have any data about it, but anecdotally that is a very lightly trafficked route. We put forward this proposal, and my apologies to Michael because, as he says, We didn't realise that a variance would need to be sought when we made the application. That only came to light during the permit process. We thought this was going to be relatively straightforward. It is not unprecedented in Oklahoma City. Certainly if you go down the alley behind North Broadway, you see several examples of this where people fall directly off to the alley into a garage opening that is only about 12 or 13 foot wide, and then into leased parking spaces. So we really were just building on that precedent for development. I should say that this is a building that has been vacant for many years, certainly underutilised for many years, and we are hoping to find a relatively economical, light touch approach to bringing this building back into use. It's fairly prominent on the corner there. It has the mural that you may be familiar with. It's quite a prominent feature in Bricktown. So we're hoping to bring some life back into that building. The issue with the drive aisle, as I said, came to light during the permitting process, and that is why we are seeking a variance. It's deemed to be two-way traffic, but our argument, I suppose, is that there are 13 people maximum going to be using this building. The number of travels that they make out of that building are going to be relatively few, and they will be familiar with the situation. So it's not like a public parking garage where people would be unfamiliar, and therefore there was a greater risk of potential accidents. So for all of those reasons, we think it's a perfectly reasonable proposal, but it does not conform to the zoning ordinance for the 22-foot two-way drive aisle. Very happy to answer any other questions you have.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
I have a question, but not for the applicant. In the event that at some point in time, if this is approved, if at some point in time in the future that becomes one-way traffic on that alley because of much higher density use, that would override this approval. Is that correct?
This is not about the alley. This is about the throat on the interior of the garage. So I'm not sure that changing the traffic on the alley from one-way or from two-way to one-way would have any impact on this approval.
Very good.
Okay. I did have one sort of similar related question. So this is, I mean, it's obviously kind of an adaptive reuse. What I wasn't sure about Michael, when you were explaining some of the details, is there on the administrative approval, is there a design or exterior changes to the building already that have been sort of reviewed or approved, or is that still forthcoming?
Yeah, these are them right here, what you're seeing on
Okay.
the screen. This is what's been approved through the administrative review.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Okay. You have
This is just for staff. I'm still unclear on, we can't approve this, it's just a recommendation on them going in front of the variance.
The work to the building facades has already been approved administratively by staff. It's later on your agenda, as a matter of fact, just as a reporting item, just like we do with all administrative approvals. Right. If we had known that a variance was required when we did the administrative approval, we would have scrapped the administrative approval and brought the whole thing up to you in one big ball. Yeah. But because we didn't know a variance was required, we just did the administrative approval without the variance. And then we became aware later on that a variance was required, so we have to bring the variance. Anything that requires a variance in the design district requires a recommendation from the committee to the BOA. That's why we're bringing it to you for today, for that item.
And there is an existing drive in that building, is that right? Or is this, I mean...
I believe that's an existing garage door opening that they're replacing with a glass door, yes.
Right.
That's correct, but
Okay.
as I said, the entrance on Reno, there is an existing garage door there, is not suitable for vehicular access with the changes to Reno there and the
Right.
bridge.
It hasn't been used in a long time, but it is a garage door opening.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least in my interpretation of this, it seems like, I mean, it's adaptive reuse for the building from the standpoint of the conditions around it have changed. That building sat there for a while, and we're trying to clean it up. Sounds like we looked at this and went through the typical process, but then it got kicked back upon further review by development services. So that's kind of my interpretation, at least. Okay. Other questions for the applicant or on the item?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for this variance.
I will second that.
All right, great. It's been moved and seconded that we recommendation of approval. Any other discussion on the item? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
All right, looks like we are at item 6C, BCA 16-00001 at 137 East Sheridan Avenue, 11 East Reno Avenue, and 101 South Oklahoma Avenue. Staff report for this item?
Yes, this item was brought back to you as a continued item from the February 10th meeting. We had to continue it at that time because we learned that the notice, I'm sorry, not the notice, but the copy of the SPUD that had been included in your packet was an inaccurate copy that had not been fully recognized the action that the City Council took on the SPUD. And now that's been corrected. The version of the SPUD that's in your packet is the basically the zoning for the site that applies to these three locations for these three sign installations. You are familiar with this case because there were three individual certificates of approval applications before you last year that I think drug out over a few months because there were a lot of concerns and questions about the proposed signage. Eventually those items were withdrawn with the exception of the approval of the new parking attendant booths on each of the three parking lots, as well as some new fencing that were approved, that was approved at all three locations. But the signage was removed from those three approvals. Subsequently to those approvals, the applicant applied for a simplified plan unit development to establish new standards for signage on these three sites. That approval, the SPUD was approved by the City Council at its meeting on October 13th, with the understanding that the actual design of the signs be brought back to the committee for your design review consideration. So while the signs themselves are now allowed by the zoning for these three locations, the design of the signs themselves is up for your consideration at this hearing. I will tell you that staff has reviewed all three applications for all three sites and determined that the size of the signs at all three locations is in compliance with the maximum allowed sign area for all three locations, and the method of mounting the sign on an I-beam, which was also specified in the SPUD, has been satisfied with the design that's been presented before you. Your design review latitude is pretty much limited to whether you think the sign should be landscape format or or portrait. You can get into that. You can get into the exterior skin of the sign. You can get into the height of the I-beam or the color that the I-beam is painted, but that is pretty much the limit of your purview in this review. So we've prepared a recommendation for you of approval of all three signs, and we're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Questions for staff?
These are considered accessory and non-accessory, correct?
That's a good question. I believe that through the discussions that were held at the City Council level before the SPUD was approved, that the signs were required to display a certain amount of information that is pertinent to the Bricktown area in general. Typically, an accessory sign is considered something that's advertising something that's on site exclusively. So this kind of broadens that interpretation a little bit by broadening it out to the Bricktown district as a whole. being the site, but that's the way the council approved it. So it does definitely include accessory signage for the parking, but then also non-accessory signs for things that are going on off-site of the parking. But they're Bricktown specific.
The reason I asked this is on the signage standards. For an accessory sign, there's it doesn't say anything about anything less than 50 square feet in total area. This is 32 square feet is what they're proposing. But on an accessory sign, if it's bigger than 50 square feet, it has to be a certain distance from the curb line. Mm-hmm. On a non-accessory sign, there is no differentiation on the size.
Well, yeah, that's mostly about EMDs, yeah, that has a separation requirement when you're over 50 square feet. I don't think it's necessarily about accessory versus non-accessory separation. The separation is really tied to whether it's an EMD or not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Michael. So we denied this last time around, and it was denied by the Planning Commission as well, as I understand.
The SPUD?
Not the SPUD. The original application.
Well, you approved the parking lot, the parking attendant booths, and the fencing.
Right.
And I'm not sure, were the signs removed from the applications by the applicant? Okay, yeah, the signs were removed from the application by the applicant, so there was no denial of the signs at that time.
I understand.
We did give a recommendation of disapproval for the SPUD application,
Correct.
Which was specific to the signs.
What were the issues at that time that with regard to the existing ordinance that caused us to recommend denial of the SPUD?
There's a lot of, in general, there's a lot of concerns about EMDs because once they go up, being able to regulate content is virtually impossible. And we're not in the business of regulating content anyway because of First Amendment issues. However, we are allowed to regulate content via accessory versus non-accessory, and that is still legal. And because of that, I think there was a lot of concern about opening up the door by approving these signs to allowing for non-accessory signage above and beyond what the code already allows for. There are certain provisions in the Bricktown district right now that do allow some non-accessory signage in Bricktown, but they're very specific and finite examples of where it's allowed. One example is for off-site advertising of parking lots that happen to be, somewhere in the Bricktown district, but they're not so obvious that you're readily able to find them. So they thought it was a good idea to allow for off-site signage, non-accessory signs for those uses. And I think there are some other limited applications before the SPUD came along that the district allows for non-accessory signage. But the evermore you open the crack on the door for non-accessory signs, I think that it begins to worry and concern people more. Apparently, the applicant was able to convince the city council that this was not something that they should be concerned about, not necessarily a precedent that should be considered as a precedent for other applications. And I think, in fact, when I was watching the hearing at the city council, one of the council people asked the planning director whether or not there were any plans in the works to come up with regulations for Bricktown that would, in effect, set new regulations and standards for any such signs in the future. And the answer was yes. And the department is working on a set of regulations that would pertain to wayfinding in and throughout Bricktown, and it may be expanded to downtown. I'm not sure the time frame of when those regulations will be brought forward. It's a work in progress, and as you know, sometimes these things take a lot longer than they were originally anticipated to take. But I think that that affirmative answer by the director assured the councilman who asked the question that it was safe or acceptable to approve this particular SPUD. And therefore, that garnered his vote, and along with several others on the council. Therefore, that SPUD was approved, and that's what we're reviewing. That's what we reviewed these three signs against in terms of those parameters that were set forth in the SPUD document.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? The applicant present?
Yes.
Good morning. Tim Johnson with Johnson & Associates, 1 East Sheridan Avenue, Oklahoma City, here on behalf of the applicant. Maybe just to simplify a little bit of what Michael has said is, yes, non-accessory signs are permitted here in the SPUD. They will be accessory and non-accessory, but their limits, as Michael mentioned, was the Bricktown area. So we're only advertising events that are impacting Bricktown area. As part of the SPUD, we met with the Bricktown Association, garnered their support, and worked really hard on squeezing the screws on this SPUD down to where everybody felt comfortable with management of it. So from the time you can turn it on to the time it has to go off, the amount of time that's being donated to the Bricktown Association for public information, all of that is spelled out in the SPUD. The height, the location, and the square footage of the sign is also spelled out in the SPUD. So as Michael mentioned, the design has always been to use a wide flange beam, vertical, painted black, and a standard 32 square foot EMD sign. The owners debated whether to paint the outside edge of that black or use aluminum. They've chose to use finished aluminum on the outside edge, which is what the exhibit had shown early on in the process. But this is the anticipated location of the sign on Oklahoma, 8-foot vertical, 4-foot wide, to get to 32 square feet. But the edge is simple. It's the finished aluminum edge that's very thin, giving it a very no-edge look. And this is the type of sign that the Bricktown Association had mentioned they'd like to see in Bricktown if there was going to be MDs, and so that's what we've complied with. And I think beyond that, I don't know any other questions that I didn't hear Michael already answer regarding the SPUD or the approval process. I might rewind up a little bit. One of the reasons we withdrew the sign and took it from the zoning perspective was two-part. One was the lack of ability to control it. Only through the zoning application could you provide those control measures. So that's one of the reasons we went. The other reason was there was really nothing in the Bricktown overlay at the time that kind of dictated really what sign size it should be. One meeting ahead of when we met on ours, there was a 650 square foot sign proposed on the parking structure, and the staff recommended they reduce it to 500. And we were trying to get at the time 54, as I recall. So the compromise was we made the sign smaller to make it more pedestrian friendly and not overbearing, and also provide the regulations that were really felt like weren't specific enough to control the sign. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
This may be a staff question, but in a scenario, if this parking lot is sold, does the new owner have to abide by the SPUD regarding the sign and what the contents are?
Yeah, by virtue of the SPUD, that is zoning that is in place just as well as it might be DDD1 or DBD or BC zoning. So that zoning doesn't go away. And if the property were to change hands and transition into another use, theoretically the sign could remain if the applicant chose to do so, but these regulations would also remain in play.
Okay.
Okay. Additional questions by the applicant? Okay. Thanks, Tim. I think I would just make one comment for the benefit of the committee, because I had the unfortunate distinction of wading probably into this further than I anticipated and sitting in some of these discussions. I think one of the challenges for me with, I think the design as it stands is an improvement, but I still find that contextually it just presents challenges for me when looking, at its surroundings, et cetera. So unfortunately, the SPUD that was presented was very specific, so that was a good thing in some respects, that it was very narrow, very, very limited. But on the other hand, it also kind of dictated that there are, we usually look at things in 3 dimensions. We kind of have 1, maybe 2 dimensions of elements to look at too for it. So it doesn't give a lot of latitude in interpretation. So it's hard for me to really sort of get behind the effort in that regard. That's just kind of my statement. I think in addition to what Tim and what staff has expressed, I did sit in on the conversations with the applicant and with the planning department and with members of the Bricktown Association and the City Council when this conversation was taking place, and just think that there were a lot of there's different levels of communication, et cetera. So I think this process was messy, and so we got the best result out of all of that. But I do want to relay that, at least that perception or that experience that I had in this coming about. So I think that's why we have what we have here today. It was the best compromise of a messy situation as far as how the things were communicated, the challenges that were presented, and some of the concerns being addressed sort of piecemeal and piece by piece. Anyway, I think if we don't have any other questions, would entertain a motion or some action on the item.
I make a move to approve as presented.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion? All right, seeing none, can I suggest that we either move to continue or propose an alternate motion?
I make a motion for denial of the application.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion to deny the design as presented, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay. Any abstentions? So the record show there are three in favor of the motion and 1 opposed to the motion. So motion carries. Okay, next item on the agenda is 7, other business, where there is none. Item 8A, presentation by Richard Brown, RBA Associates. Staff have comments on this?
We have recently met with the applicant on this case, and we're very excited about the prospect of this building coming to fruition. It's a pretty sizable project in an area that is experiencing a lot of transition right now by the Criterion near Charlie Christian and East Sheridan. I did receive a phone call from the applicant on Monday indicating that, as with many projects at this stage in the development, there's a lot of moving pieces, and they were thinking about perhaps skipping this because they now know that they're going to come in with something. I think the building that you're going to see here is essentially going to be the same, but what's going on the rest of the site will be significantly different. And because of that, they were contemplating not making the presentation today, but I encouraged them to come and get your feedback for at least the building anyway. I'm not sure what their timetable is for sorting out the rest of the details on the rest of the site and when they might be back in with a formal application for you to consider. But at this point, it really is just about making them being able to give you a presentation of what their concept is, at least for the building right now, and getting some comments back from the committee on the design of the project.
Okay. Michael, just as a comment, and when the applicant comes up as well, I think that's good advice, at least from my perspective. I think it's good to have the conversations as early as possible, because one thing we don't want to do is prolong these, and we know we have specific timetables and schedules. So any of that information that we can get early on, at least you can get feedback from the committee. At least that would be my thought would be you can get feedback, even if it's things that aren't specific here, but it allows us to start to form an opinion. Are there questions or comments for staff on the presentation? Okay, is the applicant present?
Good morning. I'm Rick Brown with Richard R. Brown Associates Architects. Could we go to the west elevation, Michael? Oh, do I? Okay. Yeah, there we go. This is a project that I'm kind of losing my voice, so sorry about that. I don't always sound like this. The project is on the east end of Bricktown, which is currently the 4.5-acre site at Charlie Christian, just south of Sheridan. That's currently the home of a body shop, a metal building right now, and the intent is to demo all of that building and clean the site off. This building will be one of the first buildings built that's the new canopy concept by Hilton. The project we competed for, my client competed for, and won over some other applicants in the area. The project is generally designed to kind of anchor that east end of the Bricktown development. Our concept, this is a full-service hotel, not a limited-service hotel as most are. It will have a restaurant on the ground level. It has, and I do have a floor plan that I'll show you, but most of the public spaces all address the ground level, and the first floor is designed to be up within 10 feet of the property line. We set it back 10 feet because there's kind of a limited right-of-way right there, and the Hilton concept is that, not only do we would like to be able to kind of bend the right-of-way in to have a drop-off where it's shown on the left side of the elevation, but the concept of having the entire lobby is really more of a bar, cafe kind of experience in addition to being the lobby. So it's really a very kind of contemporary concept for a full-service hotel, in that, even the meeting room space is designed to be really flexible and to be able to address younger companies. It's not a convention hotel. It's not a conference center. It's really designed to be kind of an active, energetic place, more like some of our projects in Dallas, like Hotel Zaza and that kind of experience. We see this as being a kind of young, energetic scene. We also have, if you see up on the rooftop on the 10th floor, that's designed to be a rooftop bar and restaurant. So the top floor recesses back a little bit to create that on the left or the north side of the building to create that kind of a rooftop bar experience with a trellised area, and that particular corner overlooks downtown, so we think that'll be a great energy creator for the entire project. The hotel itself currently has 168 rooms. As Michael was saying, there's a little bit of movement on that. We think once we bring it to you, hopefully a month from now, it will have one less floor because of the number of rooms that the surveys show that's a little bit better economically than the 168 rooms that we currently have. this is although it's a canopy project, that there are a number of them going on. There are none constructed now. They'll all be different. They're all designed to be more indigenous to each area that they're located in than your typical hotel, that's been a prototype. This is not a prototype. It's a ground-up project that we're trying to tailor specifically for Oklahoma City and more specifically for Bricktown. Materials on the exterior currently, the ground floor is 3 different colors and 3 different sizes of limestone block masonry. The front facade is, I think, 24 feet tall, and it steps back 1 bay to the tower. So the street front elevation we've tried to tailor to be more pedestrian friendly. Hilton's one of their only requirements is that we create an active street scene. So, that with the cafe dining and bringing some of that seating out to the sidewalk area is a big component of the design, which is another reason that we want to set the building back, that 10 feet from the property line to create enough right-of-way to be able to do that. All of the service, trash, loading area will be handled in the back of the building, which is on the east side. That'll most generally come off of Lincoln. Currently, you'll see in the site plan that we attached to the proposal that, let's see, that's the part that really is wiggling around a little bit right now. You can see canopy, and you can see what we've shown to the east as surface parking. The building itself is pretty well set. What's floating around a little bit is how the remainder of the site gets master planned. So we're not asking to approve any of that right at this point. Our initial thrust is going to be just for the building and to create, we've shown that parking. What we're working on right now that, caused us to question whether we were ready to present yet is that we're doing a parking garage on the site, and part of that's for the hotel, but the remainder of it is that we know there are going to be either additional apartments, condominiums, or hotels on the site, and we're trying to master plan the entire site to be able, number one, to take advantage of this large lot, this 4.5 acre lot, but also, we know that that's going to happen, so we need to make sure that we're protecting the Canopy Hotel by master planning it in advance. We also need to provide additional parking for our rooftop restaurant tenant. One of the conditions that they have for doing it is that we create parking. Just from an urban design standpoint, we also have the new criterion that's getting ready to open with no parking, and they've actually come to us and said, hey, do you have an opportunity to create some additional parking by doing a parking structure? We were already talking about doing a parking structure, but the size of it's been moving around a little bit because all these people that don't have parking are coming to us and saying, hey, can we rent some of your parking? So the other complicating factor that really doesn't show up in this site plan is there's on the north end, about halfway between the top of Canopy and our north property line, is a huge storm sewer easement that cuts across the property and then angles over to Lincoln Boulevard that we're trying to deal with. This is a great site to master plan until you think about this big 50-foot storm sewer easement that runs right through the middle of the top half of it. So it makes the frontage on both sides of the site a little more than complicated. So that's part of the factor that's holding us up. Ideally, what we'd like to do, and you guys might be able to weigh in on it, is if we did a parking garage, the best place for us to do it would be just north of Canopy going up Charlie Christian, and the thought is to have retail on that first level, and then, for somewhere between 4 and 8 floors of parking total in that parking garage facing Charlie Christian. Normally I would probably tend to orient that parking garage more inward on the site, but to take advantage of what might be a potential to span a parking garage over that easement and allow enough height under that second floor for service. I think service trucks, backhoes, whatever. I mean, it's a storm sewer easement that's probably been there since statehood. I mean, it's a really old easement. In fact, we're having a little bit of trouble even locating exactly where the pipes are. It was an old railroad, vacated railroad easement originally, so we're trying to get a grip on exactly where that is and what it is, and our next step will be to meet with engineering and see if there's any possibility that we could span over that just with a parking garage, not with any other occupiable space, but with a revocable easement or whatever that might be to do that. But some input from you guys might be helpful there, but we're trying to figure out a good way to deal with that and not lose, a quarter of the land area with this big storm sewer easement. So that's one of the challenges. We're hoping to be able to get back to you next month with some real 3D renderings and that sort of thing to give you a better perspective of what it is and get your approval. Again, the exterior materials, it's primarily a masonry building with 2 different colors of brick on the upper levels. We've created, and this is the canopy room size is it's a large room, so it's I think 14 by 27 feet, so it's a pretty good size boutique hotel size. But on the front of the building, on the west elevation that you see here, we've taken the whole end wall and just put our window wall kind of being the entire room on the end. It's not a PTAC kind of hotel. I mean, this will be an all variable refrigeration system, so we won't have any louvers on the outside of the building to deal with, so we can carry that window wall. Kind of tried to create a mosaic kind of appearance on the exterior with the glass, doing 2 different colors of glass. The center portion all the way up that has a downtown view, we've done some glass balconies, and then the top of it with the 12-foot glass, that's all part of the restaurant, the rooftop. So just to kind of show you what you guys can see in your packet of the ground floor, our interiors group is a group out of Dallas, Seifert Murphy, who are working on a number of the canopy projects. The concept really fits Bricktown, we think, because of the kind of reductive industrial nature of what the canopy concept is. It's really it's a premium kind of $200 plus a night experience, but it's got that kind of high-end industrial kind of look to it. We're not trying to recreate an old building, but we are trying to do with the masonry. We're also the centerpiece of it, and the ends are all kind of a raw cement plaster, raw sealed cement plaster that's not colored or anything. So, to try to keep that industrial kind of look with that kind of refined industrial, I guess. So you can see some of the images that we have, concrete wood floors, exposed ceilings, interior brick, and some of the detailing will be a lot of metal, a lot of refined industrial kinds of things, not typical of most luxury hotels. You can kind of see the the way that the main public space really becomes a hybrid between bar, cafe, and lobby space with the entry desk right here, a big open bar where they'll have, we'll do a limited menu on the lower floor with kitchen for full room service. They can do pizza oven, demonstration type, visual kitchen, so that there's the ability to have that experience along with a large bar. And the bar concept that we have now is kind of a smaller gastropub kind of thing, more like you'd see at the Moth in Dallas or even Republic here, that kind of thing. Meeting room space in this block is really designed so it kind of flows into the bar and cafe experience, and it all becomes kind of seamless. So again, it's not a conference center hotel. This is a space where we see the target client being tech companies and that sort of thing, a kind of younger, more energetic meeting situation, and pivoting doors that'll open up the entire space so that you may have one meeting in one space, another meeting in another space, and kind of rent the whole thing or pieces of it that can be closed off. So very kind of a fluid experience, very open. The exterior, this is a room that is called the Retreat, and then an exterior courtyard. This is actually an exterior space with a fountain fenced from the back area, and this space has big glass overhead doors that open to the lobby and open to the courtyard, so that this whole retreat area, which is designed to be a quieter kind of area that you can go work, sit around, relax, do whatever, and there will probably be a fireplace in both of these areas. That'll be something that just kind of makes this is more high energy here, and then it gets a little quieter and more low energy, relaxing over here. Ground floor fitness center, and an area called Transfer with bathrooms, shower, big locker areas where if you have a 3 o'clock flight and you check out of your room at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, you've got a few hours, you can store your things in there, even shower, restroom, a place where you don't have to necessarily leave the hotel, but you can leave your stuff there. So I don't want to get too deep into it. Hopefully you guys get a kind of a sense of the concept and give you a chance to ask questions or make comments. We're kind of in the late design development phase, so we're at a point where any input's appreciated and productive. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, and we'll field your questions.
I'm sorry. Thank you for your very comprehensive presentation. Just before we go to questions, I kind of want to reiterate a point just as I'm thinking about it, because I know that you guys have plans for the entire area. So any things that you feel comfortable in sharing or giving context, I think as the committee's asking questions, I think to the extent that they're going to have opinions about these things, which I'm sure my colleagues will, I'm thinking about this as an opportunity to give feedback to you as well to help with that master planning effort, so that by the time some other things show up, we kind of have a process that works for you. I think the plan and the idea is great, so I don't want this to turn into something that becomes an impediment to you all being able to get a development done. Sure. But I do want to give you feedback and good thought and good context
Great.
For what it would take to get
We
it.
appreciate that.
Okay, so questions for the applicant from the committee?
Yeah, Rick, you touched base a little bit on the materials. I'm looking at the west elevation right now, but the gray area behind all of the major facade, what was that material?
It's a raw cement, just a cement plaster that's just troweled smooth with control joints. Okay. and sealed. I mean,
And are you? I see that mosaic going on in that. Is that the intent, is to have different shades of that as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, because it's raw and we're not putting any color on it, it'll kind of come out like that. I mean, it's kind of like doing a raw concrete. I mean, that's the way it'll look, like raw concrete. It's an effort to kind of do a refined version of something raw and industrial on the building.
Is there any thought of putting any kind of a brick material on the perimeter, at least facing, is that Sheridan? Or Reno, I'm sorry.
It actually faces in between.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of the other two elevations that are not shown. There's a lot of gray material up there.
Yeah, that really is just kind of that end piece that sticks out. That this goes back like that 60 feet or 30 feet, the depth of the room on the right and left sides, and that'll wrap around and be all brick. So
the lower portion of it that I'm looking at with the different colors and sizes of the CMU, it wraps around and dies into that gray material that's basically the two stairwells.
Yeah, that's right. And then up above that, where the rooms are on the upper levels, that the dark burgundy colored brick will wrap around and die into that too. So really more than half of the end elevations will end up being brick. But again, that's less a cost issue than trying to get just that kind of industrial look and the contrast with that smooth troweled plaster, instead of going to EFS and just kind of the typical deal, which I don't have any problems with, but this is a little bit different kind of project, and that spirit of the project wants to be a little more crusty, a little more industrial. So, and then the bottom is the product is that I'm sure you're familiar with, is that Renaissance limestone. That's it's a great product. It's a compressed limestone product. It's like cast stone, only a much more refined kind of product. We've got a lot of color choices and even size, but it's a large format block that's like a 12 by 24 block, and then we'll go down to where the red bands are in that, or the rose color will end up being, I think, a 4-inch version of that, so that you got 12, 12, and then an 8 and a 12, or an 8 and a 4. So it, and we'll do some of them with the smooth, honed texture, and then the red block will end up being a kind of a rock-faced texture of that product. And then I didn't talk about the front canopy, but the orange in it, we tried to splash a couple of spots of orange in it. That's the canopy image color, is that bright orange. So we've tried to do a little bit of that. We'll also we'll do a night rendering for you when we bring it in, because the plan is to do some kind of neat LED stuff on the exterior and give it a real presence at night. This has to be an energetic, vibrant place. There's a lot of competition for room nights in the Bricktown area, and we're going to be, this is a Skirvin plus price point, so we have to, we've got to do something to make it a place that has the energy and a place where people want to be, or there's not going to be a competitive sense that somebody needs to go there instead of going to one of the other projects. So cast stone base around the entire project. I didn't mention that. Oh, I was talking about the car drop off. That piece, the L-shaped piece, is that's just a raw polished concrete piece that will suspend some stainless steel beams down below that, and then suspend a glass canopy from that will kind of cantilever out over the drop-off, and that would be the place where people would get dropped off at the curb. So, it's a fairly simple canopy, but I think kind of a an industrial, elegant statement at the drop-off that has a certain amount of transparency to it, but it also kind of emphasizes that industrial, elegant spirit of the project.
You mentioned that earlier. I didn't see it on the site plan, but I'm glad you.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
That's something that we're actually working on currently, Omar.
Is that on the east or the west?
That's on the east side. Yeah, right on the street.
On the west side, you mean?
West.
I'm sorry, west side. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is the Charlie Christian elevation that we're going to. It'll be an exercise with the engineering department, but what we'd like to do is kind of bend that drive in to the right of way so that, we're not creating a big porticus here, but we do have a space out of the traffic pattern as a drop off. So
I have a question. If I'm looking at a 2.02, that's just a composite floor plan, could you explain to me where the veneer material is located on that? Please. Keep going. One more. There we go.
So I'm sorry, repeat.
So where's if I'm looking at the elevation, I have that concrete finish, I have brick.
Okay.
I'm seeing a massing of that concrete finish. I don't see it reflected in the floor plan.
I've got you. Okay. The finish, the plaster texture, the cement texture would be the end of the stairway, this element right here on the ends. And the brick would come around from here to here and over to here and die back into that. We haven't gotten to the point of actually elevating the ends, but my guess is that we'll look at it a couple of different ways. Number one, with the plaster going around and dying back into here, where the brick again takes over, and then the brick is the entire elevation here, and here on the east elevation with just plaster in that center base. So, there may be, and again, it's the way the west elevation works. This piece kind of comes up and goes over the top and kind of frames the remainder of the brick right there. So I think that synthesis of materials is going to look pretty neat the way that we've got it put.
Can you show me approximately where the top floor is going on above? Because it sets.
Yes.
Because we don't have a floor plan for that.
Let's see if we have a. We don't have a.
It's not in
plan
your
of that,
package.
but the top floor is effectively, it comes out to here and then comes out and then goes back. So it's really this piece of the upper floor and then this becomes the patio up above right here, those two bays.
And then the top floor runs all the way to the other face?
Yeah, that's correct. The top floor would align all the way across with this face.
And is that the east elevation?
That would be the east elevation.
So then the
Correct.
brick veneer that's going up the tower is in the same plane as your
Right.
polished concrete?
That's right. That's right.
And I have a question for staff. Is there a certain, how many feet we have to go up to streetscape? I know you can go so far back, you have to be so high with building, so we keep that urban streetscape.
Yeah, you're supposed to be within 10 feet of the property line, 25 feet up.
Okay, so we're 10
Which
feet, and you're
is essentially
24.
what we're having,
Okay,
24, 25.
thank you, Michael.
Other questions?
I have a couple of comments first. First of all, I think it's a very handsome project, and I think all of us are interested in getting the application in as soon as you can, starting construction.
Sure.
I'm particularly pleased that you've created a space to accentuate the streetscape, and believe me, I realize how early this is in your design, but I would hope that you would energize that facade, whether you're moving that glass line back and forth a little bit, something that that creates a little bit more excitement out there. I don't know whether you can put more permanent ballards in to identify the outdoor seating or what. But, and again, I realize as you're moving that canopy out over that area, you'll address that. But I think we'll be particularly interested in seeing that when it comes back.
You bet.
So.
Yeah, I would agree completely.
Okay. Other comments or questions for the applicant? Okay, so a few that I had sort of echoing the comments of some previous. I think one of the things that I'm excited about is the opportunity maybe to bring traffic to the East Bricktown side, and so I think going back to what Tom was mentioning about the street activation, it's really important. I was just kind of glancing as you were talking at the surrounding area, and I know it's bound to change, but I think we want to make sure that the design opportunity that's here, so when you just think about how the exterior plays in with the rest of the surrounding, and a parking lot, huge parking lot across the street.
Yeah.
So what can we do to remove that as a barrier at least? I think you guys are going to create a beacon.
Sure.
So that's one just kind of thought or concern. And this also obviously playing up with what's happening with steel yards and with the criterion, I think will be great. So that street will be important. And then I think some of the sight lines that others have brought up, just so understanding that you have the raw concrete material is good to hear, because I was concerned on what that fill was, but it's hard to know what the materials are, right?
I understand.
I think also, so when you guys bring this back, if not necessarily samples, but if you have some examples, even just pictures
we'll
of
certainly
some of those
do
things,
that.
I think that'll be helpful, because what you're saying sounds really good. So that'll be.
We will do that.
And then let's see. So the other piece was just this is more of a comment. It's differentiation, and I think one of the challenges we're going to run into with, especially the hotel development, and this has a lot more to do, I think, maybe just philosophically with thinking about our review and design, is these buildings that are made not just for right now today, but that they'll have a future.
Right.
So it seems like you guys are articulating that pretty well, but that's also why I made the comments earlier that if you have other ideas that you are free to share, that it might help to build a thought or a reference to, so that we know. Like one of the comments or concerns or questions I have is how this project, and I know it's getting a little ahead of ourselves, but how this project will also even impact Lincoln, which is a major sort of ingress-egress thoroughfare.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're going to do some great things, I think, for Charlie Christian and bringing life to that street. But those are things I think the more that you all are thinking about in your design, which I think you've got a great start, I think it will be helpful and make it easier for us to give you good feedback.
And the next time we come in, we'll bring our master plan and have it a little bit more thoroughly ferreted out, hopefully with engineering and that sort of thing. So we've got a better idea where we're headed with that to show you.
Yeah. So appreciate the well thought out plan. The fact that this is different than what's existing, I think will be nice, and you guys' thoughts. I think I look forward to seeing what you have to.
Thank you all for your comments. We appreciate that.
All right. Let's see, that was item 8A1. If we don't have any other questions on that, we can move to 8B, administrative approval reports. Michael?
Yeah, items 1 and 3 are both just a couple of signs that were approved administratively. The first is for the Criterion, and the third is for the JDM Place building over on Mickey Mantle. Item 2 is the administrative approval of the item we heard earlier, where we had the recommendation for on the variance to the Board of Adjustment. That's pretty much all we had on the administrative approval report this month.
Can I ask one question about item 8B1?
Sure.
So what sign configuration did they settle on? And I don't need a lot of detail, I'm just curious.
They already had a configuration approved for the signage that's over the entrance at the marquee, and then the vertical blade sign that sits also over the entrance.
It's coming off the corner, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, it's at the corner, at the Camford corner. These signs are, we've had a little bit of controversy over them. Much like the Chesapeake Arena has naming rights and the Chevy Bricktown Event Center has naming rights, the naming rights for this building go with Anheuser-Busch. And these signs are in addition to the signs you're familiar with at the Camford corner that give the marquee and the Criterion name. But they are basically naming rights signs that go on the upper level. They're relatively small for the size of the facades of the building. They kind of sit off to the sides. They're not on the angled wall, but they're at the corner on the squared off portions of that wall, and they're on the second floor. The predominant name on these signs is the Bud Light. We made certain that the applicant knew that they couldn't just put a Bud Light sign on the building. It's not allowed per the code. So much like Chesapeake Arena and Chevy Bricktown Event Center, they've worked the name Criterion into these signs, so it now says Criterion powered by Bud Light. I'm not sure that it's the best that we'd like to see on this building, but it is allowed by the code given the fact that it's pertaining to, it's considered now an accessory sign because it's relating to the tenant as opposed to a product and a product alone. So under the rules of the code, it's allowed, and we're going to go forward with it. It's probably something we might want to think a little bit harder on going forward in terms of what the regulations say about those kinds of signs.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, anything else for you, Mike?
I wasn't going to bring it up, and I was going to wait to see if the committee noticed and made a comment, but you'll see that, but I decided to bring it up anyway. You'll notice that the ordinance amendment that was brought before you at the last meeting is not on this agenda. We had it loaded up and ready to go, and then we came across a concern related to the type of noticing that had to occur for the amendment.
Sorry, you say noticing?
Yes.
Okay.
And at the time we realized the concern, we also realized it was too late to meet the noticing requirement for this meeting, so we pulled it from the agenda. The noticing will be dealt with in time for the next meeting, and you'll have it on your agenda at that time.
So I brought this whole stack of papers for nothing.
So does that mean I don't need to ask my question, when will we see the ordinance amendment?
I cut you off at the pass. You will see it at the April meeting, and from the looks of things, we won't have the parking garage in Bricktown that we thought we were going to have. We will not have the Canopy Hotel that we thought we were going to have. So it looks like that meeting might be all dedicated to the amendment. So it gives you guys plenty of time to kick all your ideas around. I will say, I don't know, how much can I say?
Feel free to say as much as
I
you
will
like,
say
Michael.
that there was a question raised at the last meeting regarding a requirement that had been written into the code that limited the amount of a first floor elevation that could be dedicated to vehicular access to parking garages in buildings. We have reworked that now so that that requirement is completely gone, and we have turned to some new guidelines that we've put into the code later in the latter part of the document where all the guidelines are compiled that don't get into percentages or feet or anything like that. They speak to the issue of trying to limit and minimize conflicts between vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic, and that's kind of where we left it. So that's one thing we did take upon ourselves to try and rectify between last meeting and this meeting, but unfortunately couldn't present it to you this meeting. So we'll see you in April on that.
Thank you for doing that.
Michael, you mentioned that there is no Bricktown garage anymore. Is that the one that ADG brought to
Yeah, we had thought that garage might be on the agenda for April, but they've informed us the deadline for next month's meeting was yesterday, and we have no applications submitted in time. So
Okay, but
if it weren't for the amendment, we wouldn't have a meeting. But
Okay, it's still, you said there's not going to be a parking garage.
I think
No,
you're saying it's not going to be
it's
on
not
the
going to be on that
agenda.
agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
I didn't mean to panic you.
Right. Let's fix the headline, right? that Omar said no. Okay, thank you, Michael. Anything else for administrative approval reports? Would that comments?
That was comments from planning staff.
Oh, okay. So you jumped ahead for us.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
did.
All right. Well, you're cleaning this whole thing up. You want to finish? No, I'm joking. Okay. Comments. So item 8D, comments from committee members. Any additional comments from the committee members? Okay. The next meeting date, it looks like, is the April 13th. So it sounds like we will have at least the ordinance issue. Sorry, Tom.
We did not approve the minutes because we did not have a quorum.
Right.
Okay, great. I'm happy that you reminded me a second time. So if, I believe you guys took action to move this to later in the agenda. So let's take up item, here we go. So let's take up item number 2, which is approval of minutes from the February 10th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
I have. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes subject to the following condition, that staff review the record of item 6A, and if the motion is appropriately identified, that's fine, and if it needs to change it. There's a question about my abstention with regard to that.
Okay, item 6A. All right, so that was consideration and action. All right, so that's the continuance? Is that what we're talking about? I just want to make sure.
It's not going to change the motion itself. It's just going to change whether or not I actually abstained.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. And do we know?
My motion is for staff to check the record to find
Okay.
out
All right,
exactly
to
what's
confirm.
happened. In either way, I would still make the motion for approval.
Okay, thanks. I think I got it. All right, so it has been moved to approve these minutes with those said conditions. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes with those conditions, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
I abstain.
One abstention. So that motion carries with one abstention. Okay, so I think now we are actually at adjournment. So all in favor of adjourning, I guess we can do light consent.
Aye.
Okay, great. We are adjourned.